12. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities.
Thanks, Zach. Tonight our main speaker is Mike B. Please help me welcome Mike.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Bennett, and I'm an alcoholic. And I'd like you to know that I built this podium. Really, 24 years ago. Think that through for a minute. That was a long time ago. You guys probably don't care. Nor do you care about what else I'm going to tell you. But I don't mean about AA stuff. I know you care about recovery, right? Everybody serious that's here. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this meeting real quick. The Pacific Group in Los Angeles, California, was founded in 1960. Is that right, Marty? 1960-ish. It is the largest regularly attended meeting in the world. It meets every Wednesday night, so next time you're sitting here, I want you to think about they're over in Brentwood, where OJ allegedly didn't kill all those people. And those of you who are too young to know who OJ is, ask old people, they'll tell you. Anyways, they have between 800 and 1,200 regular attendees every Wednesday night. They have a 10-minute speaker, a brief coffee break, and then a main speaker. The format is exactly word for word as the format that we have here tonight. And you guys are following in a great tradition because there are 7 Pacific Group meetings in the world. This was number 4 that was established about 28 years ago. So just a little history for you. It's not just a place the van brings you on Wednesday. The founder of that meeting is my sponsor. His name is Clancy I from Up in the Sky. He's very famous in AA, and he's been sober now. He's celebrating this week 60 years of sobriety. 60, that's a lot. I got sober on January 26, 1992. So I have about half as much sobriety, almost as my old rotten sponsor. So I joined this group when I was 2 years sober and stayed part of this meeting for about 10 years, and I was secretary 3 times, and I absolutely loved it. Then I moved away, and I've been gone for 12 years, and I just moved back. And this is the first time I've been to the speaker meeting since I've been back in October, because I go to a meeting at 6:30 a.m. The only way I get out at night anymore is if you invite me to talk. How do I look, by the way? Somebody said it's worth applaud. Yeah, somebody says it's really nice that you dressed up for the meeting. The truth is I raced over here from work, and that's the way I dress every day, so it's not as big for me. The guy who's tape recording the meeting said to me that he always wears a tie when he speaks, and I'll tell you something, that's a long gone tradition. I was raised that way. I've been sober a long time, and it was kind of common when I was new that speakers dressed up and made a big deal out of talking, and now it's harder because nobody does it. So if you do make a big deal out of dressing up, if you're asked to speak, which is unlikely for most of you. I was looking at Jeff. So, but if you do, my hat's off to you, because it's harder to do it when nobody's setting the example. It was easy for me because everybody did it when I was doing it. But if you do it now, way to go, because it's a little tougher. Does it make any difference? Hell no. Are you going to stay sober more if you wear a tie? No. Here's what I've learned in my decades of sobriety. If you want to stay sober bad enough, you could have the worst sponsor in the world. You could go to the worst meetings in the world, and if you want to stay sober bad enough, you'll find a way to stay sober. If you want to drink, or use dope or whatever it is you do, you could have the best sponsor in the world. Go to the best meetings and read all the literature and do all the steps, and the truth is one day you'll drink again if you're willing to. So do the best you can. try to set a good example. There might be somebody in the audience one night that would be impressed with it, but just do the best you can. I was about 10 years sober when I realized I was raised by old drunks that were pure alcoholics. How many pure alcoholics are in the group tonight that have never used drugs? Never used drugs. Raise your hand if you've never used drugs. Yeah, well, welcome to the dying breed, because there are not many of us left. I can't even say I'm one of them. I was an alcoholic for sure, a pure drunk, but I smoked enough weed to fill half of the bathroom. You stacked it up tight and neat. And never got into hard drugs or pills or shooting up or anything because it wasn't around. If anybody would have ever had it at a party, I would have probably done it. And if I'd ever done some of the stuff I know about today, I might have died out there doing it. I don't think I could have gotten sober. Two of my boys have struggled with drugs most of their lives. One of them's been in treatment 3 times. And what I've learned about it and the people I've sponsored in him, I don't know if I would have been tough enough to get sober on that stuff. So again, my hat's off to you if you have. So I grew up on the streets in South Phoenix. My mother and dad were crazy people, and I was in and out of foster care and the foster system every 6 months to a year till I was 12 years old. My parents would gather everything up and get their shit together, and they would start acting like normal people, and they would come get us from whatever home we were in, my brother and I, and then we would try to be a family for a little while, but that didn't last long because they were crazy people. And a few months in, it would start to, the dynamic, that family dynamic would begin to break down, and within 6 months to 9 months, CPS would be involved. Somebody's called the cops again, and Child Protective Services have whisked us off. And somebody is watching a video while I'm talking this. This is what my talk's deteriorated to, Marty. Anyways, just saying, I never judge. So anyways, they would, take us back and stick us in another foster home or another facility. In the facility, some lady I was talking to at my job the other day, and she said, we were talking about foster system. She works in it. And I said, well, I was raised in the foster system. She said, wow, you dressed really nice, and doing well. And it's nice to see somebody that's been successful after that. And the truth is, I thought it was okay. My life at home was so crazy and abusive and scary that being in a foster home was okay with me. I didn't have any problem. I didn't like a facility. I didn't like being in a foster home because I didn't know you, whoever you were, and I didn't know the other kids, and I didn't like it, and I knew it was temporary anyways, but being in a state facility was fine with me. I didn't have any problem with it. I found my bed, I stood my ground, and I made sure we were okay, and I would make a good prisoner, I think, especially now that I'm older and ugly, because nobody wants me. I hope. But I think I would have been fine because that system didn't bother me any. I knew where what was going to happen. It was okay. But then I would go back home with my parents, and it was just horrible. And this just happened over and over. And then finally, my dad moved us out of Phoenix, South Phoenix, and moved us up here near Prescott. And his reasoning for that was to get us out of the city before we died. My brother was running with the gang down there, pretty serious, and I was a younger kid. I was following him around, hanging out with him, but they were carrying knives and guns and shit. I was just a dumb kid hanging out with them, but I'd been in juvie 3 times by the time I was 11 years old, and my dad, the last time he came and got me out of, I was at Durango, and last time he came and got me out of there, he moved us up here, and I never realized till years and years later the sacrifice he made because his job was in Phoenix, and he drove from where we lived near Prescott back and forth to Phoenix, which was a long commute, and he did that every day for a couple of years. But finally they broke down again, and they ran off, and I had an option to go with them or to stay with some neighbors that we had become close to and that they had fallen in love with me, and I decided to stay. And I was in 8th grade at the time, and they wanted me to stay so I could finish school. It's not time already, is it? No. Oh, you look nervous, so I thought he was going to hold it. I thought we were going to have to move this whole thing and start this direction with the rest of the talk so we couldn't see him, right? So, I've done that before. Anyways, what was I talking about? Oh, I was in 8th grade, and they wanted me to finish school and invited me to stay with them, so I finished school. During the summer, I started working on this little ranch as a laborer, building fence and stuff, and learning to be a cowboy, ride a horse. I'd never seen a horse up close. I'd seen them on TV, but I'd never seen one. I learned to ride horses and stuff, and what a fantastic adventure it was for a young kid. And then I started school in the 9th grade down in Mayer, and in 9 weeks in, they called a committee together and threw me out of the entire school district for violent behavior. It wasn't because I was a big tough guy and I was really hurting people, but I couldn't stay out of fights. I was in fights 2 or 3 times a week, and after several months of that, 9 weeks in, they had enough of me, and so they had this school meeting and decided that I could no longer attend school in the entire school district, not just in Mayer, but the whole Humboldt, Dewey, Mayer school district. But luckily, these people had taken me in. He was a retired military man, 82nd Airborne, fought 2 tours in Korea, 2 in Vietnam, fought at the Revolution of the Dominican Republic. He was a trained killer and an atheist, and I loved him. I thought he was the most exciting guy I ever knew in my whole life. Marty got to know him well before he died. And so I looked up to him so much that I just stood my ground. I didn't care what was going on. I was a puny little kid. I was like 145 pounds, but I'd punch you right in the eye. I'd take an ass whooping, but I was pretty good at taking ass whooping, so I didn't care. I'd taken more ass whoopings than anybody I ever met, and probably would today if I was challenged, but don't know that I would run because just wasn't built that way. But anyways, so she, though, the wife of this pair, was a retired special ed behavioral modification or behavioral education expert. That's what she did all of her career, and she had retired, and these people were grandparent age to me. So she was perfect for me because she was able to homeschool me through high school, but also she was able to teach me things about life and about society and about how to interact with people, because as you could imagine, I was probably not very fit socially. And I got better. And I did fine when I was with them. But then I would go to town as I got older, and I didn't do so well. How many of you are in a treatment facility right now? So how do you feel about while you're in the facility? It's pretty safe. It's a pretty good environment, isn't it? Because you've got a support group, you've got the counseling, you've got all the stuff that goes with it. You feel pretty safe. But how many of you worry what's going to happen when I get out of here? Am I still going to be able to stay sober? Am I still going to be able to stay focused? And when I don't have all the support group and all the people around, and I didn't realize this at the time, but looking back on it, I felt the same way. Around them, there was so much love and support that I did really well. But when I went to town and I was unsupervised, the old me came back. And if you're like me, people are very confused about alcoholism, and you guys are getting a brain full of all of this stuff at the treatment centers. They're telling you what's really wrong with you. And the truth is, a lot of them don't have an idea what's really wrong with us. And I'm going to share with you what I've learned about it, because that's why I was invited to talk up here. So around 12 or 13 years old, like most of us, I was unsupervised for the first time. Some friends scored some dope and a bottle, and we experimented with it. Now, here's what happened to me. We tend to act like and think that maybe alcoholics, drug addicts, whatever your choice is, that we're unique and that we're different from everybody else in the world. But I'll tell you what I've learned. I've never met a teenage kid anywhere who didn't feel like they didn't fit in, who didn't feel like they got handed life in this world without an instruction manual. We talk about that as though we've got the market cornered on that, but that's the truth for everybody. Every kid that ever existed felt that way. But here's the difference between me and them. About halfway through my second drink, all of those feelings of uniqueness and that I don't fit in and that I don't measure up, and if you really knew the truth about me, you wouldn't like me. About halfway through my second drink, they go away. And I feel pretty fantastic. And if you don't feel that way when you drink or smoke a doobie, do they say doobie anymore? What do they say? But if you don't feel that way, you're probably in the wrong place. Because the people that don't feel that way, that don't take in that substance and have that magic happen for them, they don't continue to do it. I didn't drink and drink and drink and drink for years and finally become an alcoholic. I drank that first few times and it did something so magical for me that I was destined to be an alcoholic. When the heat was on, when I felt like I was under so much pressure, I couldn't stand sobriety and I couldn't stand my existence, I couldn't stand life, I knew within a few seconds what I could do to change everything, completely change my reality. I could smoke a joint, maybe take a pill. I don't know, I never took a pill, but I suppose I could. I could smoke a joint, take a drink, whatever you do, and instantly I could change my perception of reality and I could feel wonderful. All of a sudden, I didn't have to measure up to you anymore. You had to measure up to me. And those normal people out there, if that happened to them when they drank, they would have continued to drink too. They didn't become alcoholic because it didn't do that for them. You guys are here, I assume, if you're like me, and I'm here because of what alcohol and drugs did to me years later. But nobody would have ever gotten there if it wasn't what it did for me when I was young and I first tried it. It made everything so wonderful for me that guilt and remorse and anger and greed and jealousy and resentment, all of these things went away just like that. Halfway through my second drink, it came together and it was perfect. Now, it only lasted about 8 seconds, but God, it was worth it, wasn't it? Absolutely worth it. Then the problem is you keep drinking and you get drunk and then stupid shit happens, right? Well-meaning people get in the way and they try to help us and tell us things like, if you had quit drinking, your life would get better. And you know what? I tried that when I was young. I was about 18 years old and married for the first time, and my first wife was already ready to divorce me about 6 months into the marriage, and everybody told me if I quit drinking, my life would get better. So I tried it, and you know what? They were wrong. Quitting drinking had no effect on my life at all, except to make it absolutely unbearable. At first, it was okay, because I didn't throw up in the morning when I got out of bed, and I could eat a little, and I started sleeping. But here's what happened after a short period of time. I started to get just a little bit irritable. Not bad, just a little. But then that turned into grumpiness, and before long, I was angry, and then the violent behavior started. Sobriety without a recovery program did nothing but get worse and worse and worse until I absolutely could not stand being sober. I hated being sober. That's why I drank. And without a solution for being sober, I would drink again, I promise you. We were talking, somebody, maybe Jeff and I don't know, somebody and I were talking the other day about not going to meetings after you get sober for a while. And you know the worst thing that happens when you quit going to meetings after a while? Nothing bad happens. You get sober, you go to treatment, everything goes well, you get out. Are you trying not to get caught talking to her while I'm talking? Yes, I saw that. It's okay. So I'm very observant. So you get out of treatment, you go to meetings like gangbusters, and everything's wonderful for a while, but then you get your life back and you get busy. And you get in a relationship, right? And then what happens? You don't have time for meetings. And you quit going to so many meetings, and the bad thing is, nothing bad happens. It's okay. You might even think, if you're like me, and I assume you are, maybe I overreacted. Maybe I just needed to quit for a while, and then I could get control of it. This time, it'll be different. And before long, life starts to set in. And if you're like me, you might start to get just a little irritable. And then after time, a little grumpy. And then before long, angry. And then the violent behavior. It may come out different in you, I don't know. But in me, that's the way it went. And then before long, I have a choice to make. And generally, the choice I would make is, maybe I could just have a couple. Maybe I could have 2 and stop. And I might once or twice. But before long, I'm right back where I was. So if you're like me, and I assume most of you are, keep going to meetings. Because when you stop, you might find that nothing bad happens. And that's a terrible place to be. Such a terrible place to be. It never ends well. I've been sober a long time, and I promise you, I have seen it over and over and over again. So anyways, I'm drinking. She finally divorces me because I tried getting sober. She was wrong. It didn't turn out well for me. I hated it, and I hated you, and I hated her, and I hated them, and I finally started drinking again, and eventually she gave up on me and divorced me, as she should have. And I've never blamed her for it because she was a good lady and a good mom, a good wife. She was just a good everything, and she deserved better than me. I was a shithead, and I acted like one, and she gave me what I deserved. So I got married again right before I was completely divorced. But this time it was going to be different. This time it was going to be different because I met a girl in a bar. Wife number 1 didn't drink. She was kind of a goody two-shoes. Wife number 2 was a lot like me. This will make it better. And it really did not make it better. It made it worse and worse and worse. And about 3 or 4 years into that, I'm drinking so bad that I've negotiated a deal with her. Now, I'm pretty young. You guys most of you look pretty young. Some of you are older, not that I could tell, but I got sober when I was 26 years old. So by the time I'm about 23, 24 years old, this thing's getting pretty rough for me. And I've negotiated this deal with wife number 2 that I'm just going to drink on the weekends. And that lasted till Tuesday. And I realized I had overreacted. So I renegotiated my deal to drink every night, but I'm only going to have 2 drinks. That lasted till the next Tuesday. And then I realized that I needed more booze than that. So I renegotiated to 4 drinks a night. And my drink of choice was brandy. I loved brandy, and I took these ice cold Coors Lights. I mean, ice sticking to them, and I'd sip this brandy and chase it with ice cold beer. And the warmth would hit my tummy, and the cold would follow it, and the magic would start to happen, and life was getting really good, right? But then after a while, I figured out that 2 little, like little brandy glasses and a beer, 2 of those wasn't enough. And gosh, how am I going to renegotiate this shit again? Because I've already renegotiated like 3 times. And so I got a bigger glass. So I went to a brandy glass about that big and my beer, and I did it again. And then a couple weeks go by, and I realize I'm still in trouble because it's not enough. And I can't drink on the way home anymore. I used to do that. I'd just drink a 12-pack on the way home and then have my 2 drinks. But she kept smelling the beer on me and seeing me stumble into shit when I got home. So the caper was up. So I started buying 6-packs of near beer, like O'Doul's and shit. Do they even make that anymore? So, all right, so I'd buy a 6-pack of O'Doul's and 2 tall cans of Coors Light. And I'd slam the Coors Light in the parking lot of the Circle K, and then when I'd walk in the house, I'd have an open O'Doul's with my 5-pack. So if she smelled booze on me, well, duh, right? And then I could have my drinks, but, you can only do so much of that because you have to be coherent when you get home to pull this off. So I kept getting a bigger glass, and one day I turn around, I'm in the corner where my little refrigerator is and my booze, and I have poured my brandy, and I've gotten my beer, and I turn around, and there she is with those Al-Anon eyes. And if any of you have an Al-Anon, you know what that means. And I love Al-Anons, don't get me wrong. When I die, I want to come back as Al-Anon, because they can work the steps and drink too. So, I like Al-Anons. However, I turn around to those Al-Anon eyes, and I said, what? 1, 2. Now get away from me. What she saw was a tea glass full of brandy. And that's what I had gotten to. And it wasn't funny anymore. I had a tea glass full of brandy and my beer. And I'd go sit in my chair and I would drink it. And I wouldn't talk to anybody. Then I would go back to the kitchen and I would fill my tea glass full of brandy and my beer. And then if she went to the restroom, I would run down the hallway and I would cork my bottle, and I would drink until I heard the flush of the toilet. And I would cork my bottle and head back to my chair. And I didn't go to my bed to sleep anymore. I slept in my chair. And about every 3 or 4 hours, I would wake up shaking violently, and I would go to the kitchen and I would get me a glass, and I would just choke down as much as I could without puking until it settled down, and then I would go back and sleep for a few hours, and then I'd do it again. And then in the morning, I would get a cup of coffee and put a little brandy in it and steady the nerves, and I'd go to work. And by noon, there was no working through lunch. I had to sneak out to the car and get a couple of drinks because I couldn't get through to 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock when it was. And then back to the O'Douls and the 2 or 4 tall boys that I could slam in the parking lot before I headed home. And this went on and on and on until I was 26 years old. I had such a low tolerance for alcohol at that point, or such a high blood alcohol content, that I was one of those drunks. I'd get off work at 5 o'clock talking normal. One drink in, my tongue got really thick and I couldn't talk anymore, and I was drunk, like almost instantly. I couldn't handle my booze. I was just drunk. Then I would just sit there and drink the rest of the night until I got up the next day, and it was just a miserable existence. So finally, she got pregnant. And that's what always ruins women, I've noticed. They do okay until they get a baby. And when they get babies, they change. And wife number 1 divorced me because we had a baby and I wouldn't straighten up. And here's wife number 2 pregnant, so I can see this shit starting all over again, you know. And so I decided to get sober. And I had tried being sober a few times and it didn't work, but this time I was serious. This time I was going to get sober because I didn't want to be another divorced kid. Another divorced guy with a kid. And because I already had 2 kids from 2 different women coming. Now I have 4 kids from 3 different women. So, you know, if you guys are keeping score, you got that to beat. There's a target for you. So later when I was sober and I'd have all my kids over to the house for the weekend, on Sunday the ex-wives would start showing up, you know, in their caravan to pick them all up. So I'd line them up by the door, and when the doorbell would ring, and I would ask them, so listen, when I open the door, you guys tell me which one of you belongs to her. They always thought that was funny. Never got one laugh out of any ex-wife, ever. So, anyways, so I finally get sober because I don't know what the hell to do. It's not funny at that time. You know, looking back on it, you can see a little humor out of it, but it wasn't funny then. It was just sad. It was very, very sad. And I get sober and I decide I want to go to AA because I knew a couple people who had went to AA and then killed themselves. So I thought that would work. I don't know. I knew another guy who went to treatment 3 times and then killed himself. So I don't know. So hell, let's try that, right? So I called a guy that I knew that was in AA, and he said to me, "Are one of you guys calling me? Who's texting me?" I went to a guy that I knew was in AA. I called him and I said, "Hey, I'm thinking about quitting drinking." And it was like, this didn't really happen, but if you're new, you can relate to this. It was like I'm on the phone. I said, "Lindsay, I'm thinking about going to Alcoholics Anonymous." And it's like my doorbell rang. Hang on a second. I open the door and it's Lindsay. He's on. How in the hell did he get there from there? Now, it didn't happen like that. But it seemed like that. It seemed like while I'm on the phone with this guy, he appears. And he shows up with a big book. And if you're new and you haven't seen a big book yet, it's kind of weird that Alcoholics Anonymous has their own book. I mean, that didn't even make any sense. Wait till you read it. People say, well, it's a masterpiece. No, it is not. The truth is, if you really read it, it's kind of dull. There's just not much there. I mean, it just drags along and it's kind of slow, and you got to really want to be sober to read that, I promise you. And hell, I read it for years and years, and I won't even hardly read it anymore because it's so dull. But anyways, so Lindsay shows up with this big book, and he's going to 12-step me and talk me into Alcoholics Anonymous and being sober. And while he's there, he has his sister he calls his sister some shit, and he puts me on the phone with her, and she's in Texas, for Christ's sake, and I don't want to talk to her. And they're just bombarding me with all this sobriety shit and AA. And finally, I realized you got to get them out of the house, you know. So I get them out and close the door, and it's like, Jesus, man, I'm never doing that shit again. So I didn't go to AA. just terrified me. So don't do that if somebody knew. And so anyways, I decided I'm just going to stay sober. I know it's miserable, but hell, it's better than all the shit I'm getting in drinking. And so I stayed sober 4 months, and the same thing happened to me. The same progression that I've explained a couple of times. I'm 4 months sober, and I'm ready to kill somebody or kill myself, and I don't know what to do. But this time, I was smart enough not to call anybody. I looked in the yellow pages under Alcoholics Anonymous, and believe it or not, they're in the yellow pages. And how silly is this? You guys don't know what the yellow pages are, do you? So I Googled AA, and I got the number to the central office, and I called them, and I said, I'd like to go to an AA meeting. And nobody asked me my name or my address or verification of who I was. It was pretty anonymous. I was impressed with that, because I would have lied anyways. Bob. Yeah. So they told me where the meeting was, so I went. I just snuck in because I didn't want anybody bombarding me with all this recovery bullshit. I just wanted to go see what in the hell you people did. So I went to AA and I snuck in, and I thought it was the weirdest damn experience of my life. I'm sitting around the AA meeting. I'm in the back by the door so I can sneak out and don't know anybody. And I'm thinking to myself, you guys are a bunch of damn candy-ass Girl Scouts. Goody two-shoes. That's all I could think. And if I was you, I'd quit drinking too. But I didn't have any better answers, so I came back. And meeting was just as dreary. And I thought, well, I'll come back again. And the third meeting I went to, I'm sitting in the meeting, and there's this old-timer who's about 20 years sober, Canadian, talked funny. And he said, I felt like to me. He wasn't talking to me. He was just talking, like the old-timers do. And I said to him, bless you. And I'm surprised that the Auburn girl didn't say something. She's Southern. You failed. I mean, this Southern lady, there you go. That's better. And so anyways, here's what he said. He said, if your problem is drinking, stop drinking, and your life will get better. When the basket comes around, put a buck in it, and you should tap dance down the street a happy, sober person. But if when you quit drinking, your life gets worse, maybe we can help you. That was the first time in my life I ever heard anybody say anything that I thought might understand what's wrong with me. I identified. That's the difference. I identified. You take Alcoholics Anonymous and you get rid of the meetings, which they did not have in the first 10 years or 5 years of AA, for those of you who are new. You get rid of the meetings. You get rid of the big book, which they did not have the first 4 or 5 years that AA existed. You get rid of the roundups that didn't exist for 15 years, the conventions. You get rid of all of this stuff, and what do you have left in Alcoholics Anonymous? What is it really? Alcoholics Anonymous is this. It's one alcoholic talking to another alcoholic in hopes of helping them reduce their feelings of difference just enough that they might take an action that they do not believe will work for them. And that's what Mickey did for me that night. He said something that I thought, maybe this guy knows what's going on with me. And long story short, because somebody's going to tell me I'm out of time in about an hour and 15 minutes. He became my sponsor, and he started asking me to do things that I didn't think would work. He started off with this question: do you believe in God? And I said no, and if I have to for this to work, it won't work for me. And I was serious. He said, are you willing to believe in God if I can prove it to you? And I said, sure, but you won't. And he was ecstatic about that. He thought that was the most exciting thing he'd ever heard, that I had this willingness to believe in God. I didn't have any willingness. I was just trying to get him to quit talking to me about it. But here's how good at AA he was. He never brought it up to me again. For a long time, he never asked me to try to believe in God or anything. He said, can you follow directions? And I lied, and I said yes. And he told me to do something, and I did it. And he asked me to do something else, and I did it. And somewhere along there, he asked me to do something that I thought was just ridiculous. It had nothing to do with my problem. Why would I do that? And he said, listen, smartass, if you don't want to do it, why don't you go drink? I know they tell you here in AA now, don't drink no matter what. I don't give a shit if you drink. If you think you can, Go do it. If you have read the big book, I'll tell you right now, there's one instruction in the big book for step 1. Would you like to know what it is? If you're not thoroughly convinced, step over to the nearest bar room and try some controlled drinking. Try it more than once. That's the instructions in AA for step 1. So I don't give a shit if you drink. If you think you can pull it off, go try it. When you're convinced absolutely without a doubt that this time it will not be different, that I can't have just 2. No matter how I mix it up, it will not work for me. I cannot successfully drink, and I hate being sober. When you're absolutely convinced at your core that that's the truth for you, maybe we can help you. We don't help people get sober here. We don't even give a shit if people get sober here. It makes no difference to us at all. We help people who have quit drinking stay sober. And that's what Mickey did for me. He helped me learn to stay sober. And when I would say to him, well, I don't know if I should do that, he would say, well, then go drink, smart ass. I'd say to him the truth, Mickey, I don't want to drink. Then why don't you shut up and do what I'm telling you to do? Well, how do you argue with that? If you're really surrendered, the only difference in me and a lot of people who come and go in and out of the program or who come and stay sober, the difference with me is I quit drinking before I got here. I wasn't willing to drink anymore. And you won't like this, but Mickey told me, he said, if it comes down to drinking or killing yourself, kill yourself. Huh? What? That's how serious he was about this sobriety thing. Jesus Christ, man, you take this thing a little too far, don't you? But you know what? That's what I've lived my life by for the last 27 years. So I just started to do the stuff he told me to do. I took an inventory. Man, I'd never told anybody the truth. Not all of it, you know. And you dress it up a little, right? And you tell them enough to where they kind of get it. It's been rough on you, but they still like you a little, right? My feeling was this, and you guys that have sat in some meetings, you can probably identify with this. I get this whole inventory thing. You know, be honest, the truth will set you free, all that horse shit, right? Intellectually, I could buy it. But here's how I felt in my gut. If you really knew the truth about me, you would open the car door and push me out and drive away. You couldn't like me if you knew the truth about me. You absolutely couldn't. So for me to take this leap of faith and give somebody my inventory, honestly, what's the odds of something like that happening for a guy like me? If you're struggling with it, man, I get it. There was nothing harder in my whole existence I ever did than to tell the truth. But I did, and I cried when I did it. It was so hard for me to get it. When it left my lips, uncontrollably, I cried because I was so ashamed of myself. And I hadn't cried since I was a little kid. I was a tough guy. You beat the shit out of me, and I'd spit on you. I might have to have you prop me up to do it, but but I didn't cry. And I was 26 years old, and I'm sitting in the passenger seat of a psychedelic Pinto station wagon. That's where life changed for me. And I'm bawling like a baby because I was so ashamed of myself for what I just said. I was so ashamed of myself. But I left there feeling better. I'm driving home from that, complete atheist, driving home for that. Secretary, who called me today, texted me today? Who was that? He's not even here. See, that's how dedicated the secretary invites me to talk, and him show up. Make him listen to the tape, goddammit. So I'm driving away from that experience. I was going to tell you, though, he told me I could talk till about 8:10. Give me 5 more minutes, 8:15, and I'll get you out of here. Mickey taught me nobody's brain can absorb more than their ass can endure. So I'll be done here in about 5 minutes. So I'm driving home from there, and this is what occurred to me after doing my inventory. What if they're right? What if there is a God? I didn't have this revelation and this wind blowing up my skirt and the bright lights and all that shit. I just had this idea. I felt good after doing my inventory, after telling the truth. I felt better about myself. I had never, ever felt better about myself. I didn't even recognize the feeling of feeling good about something I had done because I'd never done anything good enough to feel good about. And if I had, I'd done so much bad shit to cover it up, I couldn't find the good in it. But I'm driving home thinking, what if they're right? What if there is a God? What if there is some power out there that loves me? What if there's a chance I could be okay? And it changed my life. It changed my whole existence. I began to look at AA and recovery with a different attitude. I started to do the things that he was asking me to do willingly. I did something he told me to do. It made me feel better, so I did some more. And it made me feel better, and I did some more. And I kept doing that. Before long, I said the word God in front of Mickey. And Mickey said, "You just said God." And he laughed at me, and he thought that was funny. It was the greatest thing he had ever heard, that I had started to believe that even maybe there was a God. It was good for him. So I studied religion for the next 15 years. Now think about that. Anybody in here struggled with God, with this belief that there's really a higher power? For the next 15 years I studied religion, trying to find my religion. And finally, after 15 years, I thought it was all bullshit. I don't know any more than I knew when I started. I'm not any closer to any God than I was when I started. I believe, what if there's something? But I don't know what it is, and you guys are all talking about this personal connection with the God that's your God. I didn't have any of that shit, and I'm 15 years sober. So I finally said this: God, if there is something that I'm supposed to know, obviously I'm not going to find it in books and AA meetings, so I just quit looking. You tell me what I'm supposed to know when I'm supposed to know it. And I just stopped, and I just went on with my life. I went to meetings, I helped new people, I did all the stuff I was supposed to do, and I just quit giving a shit about God. If you're there, and that's good, and I'm not going to believe against you. How's that? Whatever the truth is, I'm willing to hear it when it's true. 3 years later, I had a spiritual experience that made me believe absolutely, without a doubt, that there is a God that loves me so much and that loves you so much. It is the only thing in our existence that's fair. Nothing in life is fair. Nothing except God's love. He loves you exactly the same as much as he loves me, and he loves me exactly the same as much as he loves you, and it don't make a goddamn what you've done. He loves us equally. Don't make a damn what you've done. You can't do anything to ruin it. Nothing. That's what I came to believe. I preached that for the next 2 years, all the newcomers and people that would listen about how great God was. And then my youngest son was brutally murdered. And he was 22 years old. He was going to college, had his whole life ahead of him, in love with this beautiful girl, and studying to creative writing, weirdo, you know. And he loved his daddy. He'd come home, I'd be home on the weekends from work, he'd come home and he would see me and he'd kiss me on my head and tell me that he loved me, and then he'd go mooch my food out of my refrigerator and get his mom to wash his clothes because he's a kid, you know. And then he would leave and he'd kiss me on the head. And about the third time he'd come in and out of the house kissing me and say, "God damn it, quit it. Get away from me." Damn weirdo. Wonderful kid. Loved his daddy as much as any kid ever loved their daddy. And he was brutally murdered. He was dating this girl, and her ex showed up at their dorm in college one day with a pistol and killed both of them and then shot himself in the head. And here's where I knew AA was right. Here's where I knew it was okay. The very moment that I received the phone call that said my son had died, I knew immediately that he was okay. Because God loves me, and God loves you, and God loved him. He had to be okay. It didn't make any difference. It wasn't my life that ended. It was his life. He had lived a wonderful life. And he was in school with all these hopes and dreams. He was in love with this beautiful young girl, and they had all of these dreams they thought were going to be wonderful. they thought they were going to have the career and never get in a fight and have the kids. And, you know, they just thought it was going to be so rosy and fun. And he never got to experience the truth. You know, what really happened after you've been married for 2 years and somebody's in trouble for not taking out the trash and shit, right? I mean, he was at the peak of his life. What a time to go. What a time to go. Man, didn't get to experience any of the bad shit that we learn about life. What a time to go. I knew he was okay. That was his story. His story was that was how his life went, and he got to go to school and fall in love, and that's how it ended. Nothing to do with me. God didn't take my son from me. He didn't allow somebody to take my son from me. People don't do things to us. Life just happens. It's our choice of what we do about it. You've got a choice right now. You've been sober a long time, or you've been sober a very short period of time, or you may be sitting here not sober right now, and there's no judgment in the room. And if somebody does judge you for it, tell them to fuck off. Because that's not what we do here. You're loved. God loves you. God loves me, and you're in the right place. You got a choice right now. Every day, just decide whether you want to live life and try to do things right, or whether you want to give up and stay in the hole that you've dug for yourself. It's a choice. Every one of you have it. Today, I'm absolutely convinced how loved I am. I don't care what happens today. Tomorrow doesn't make any difference. It's just life. So I have 8 grandchildren now, and I love Kung Fu Panda. So I'm watching Kung Fu Panda one day with all the grandbabies, and I'm pretending like I'm watching it for them, but I really like Kung Fu Panda. So I'm watching Kung Fu Panda. And the old turtle dude, I know, settle down. Hey, tell him I've been sober longer than him. Shush. Tell him. There. So I'm watching Kung Fu Panda, and the old turtle dude that invented Kung Fu, he's over there playing with butterflies and shit, whatever Kung Fu masters do. And this chicken comes flying in and crashes into shit, and he's out of breath, and he says, Master, I have terrible news. He said, son, there's no terrible news. There's no good news. There's no bad news. There's just news. So what's your news? And he said, well, such and such tiger that's been in prison for all these years escaped. And he said, oh my, that is bad news. Fun to laugh. There's no good news. There's no bad news. It's just news. There's no good experiences. There's no bad experience. It's just the experience you've had in your life, and it's okay. There's no judgment here. And the people that do judge you, they're sick. They're people still trying to find their way. Love them and stay the fuck away from them, because they're crazy people. And if you're one of these drug addicts or duly addicted or all of the titles and labels that get put on you, just think about this while you're trying to stay here and you're trying to stay sober. All of us are almost all dead. Just outlive the last few of us, and there'll be nobody talking about this shit anymore. Right? If you're here because you want recovery, God, you're in the right place. Stay here and keep doing what you can do to stay sober. Thanks.
Let's thank Mike, our speakers, Bree and Mike. Or no. Laura and Mike. Oh, yeah. This has been a regular meeting of the Rarely Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. You are cordially invited to join us again next week. Please bring a friend. There are approximately 100 meetings of AA each week in the Prescott area. We advise that you attend as many as possible, and we hope you will join us again soon. After the prayer, will the people who volunteered to do stuff do that stuff? And your court cards are on the back table. Let's circle up and say the Lord's Prayer. Thank you all for coming.
Silence. Let's go out with, for the still suffering addicts, let's say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into